Release the Kraken! I'm not very good with voices, but the pirates needed this Titan. They've always been a fun faction, and they've always been one of my favorite factions to play. If you watched my dinosaurs video, you could probably figure it out by how much attention the dinosaurs got in the game. But overall, their package ends up failing more often than it succeeds. I divided the pirates up into three main packages of cards: movement, destruction, and retention. And once I did so, I found out that the Titans seem to do well in games or in decks where two of these three packages work well. So I'm going to look at them from the point of view of these three packages, and how do you make them work well? How do you make your opponent's ones work poorly? And that lets us derive most of their good partners and most of their good counters. First and most importantly, the movement package. The more I play Smash Up, the stronger these cards have become in relation to the rest of the faction. They provide virtual burst by letting you play additional minions at some other base ahead of time and then moving them to the main base to control when a base breaks, or moving opposing minions to the same base as your first mates to make sure that they get to keep rolling and keep participating in more bases. This package is going to be good in almost every combination, although if you have a partner faction for your pirates that also has movement, you're likely going to end up with too many movement cards in your deck. Movement tends to have a sweet spot with maybe, 4 to 6 cards in your deck. If you have more than that, you're going to find that you don't have enough positions in which movement benefits you. And there's also going to be too many situations in which your opponents start focusing too hard on how do I make this guy's movement cards not do so well. So for the most part, the only thing you need to worry about with the movement faction is don't pair it with more movement in the partner when possible, but it also is going to work better with larger minions in the partner faction. So in this respect, the princesses are actually a neutral faction with respect to the movement package, because they give it big bodies to work with, but at the same time, you also end up with a little bit too much. You can counter the pirates' movement package during deck selection by picking bears to destroy minions when they move, or sheep to move a single minion into move a bunch of minions, and also temporarily disable movement with Bo Peep. But there's another way to restrict the pirates' movement package. If you push the tempo and make sure you have a little movement or virtual movement of your own by playing a lot of power per turn, you won't give the pirates time to play a minion at a secondary base and then move it to the primary base, and they'll find that they never get an opportunity to use their movement as virtual burst. This in turn means that the pirates end up with at most their destruction and retention packages, which may not be enough to make them a good faction. Next, we have the destruction package. Without the Kraken, this isn't very good, because while there may be 8 2-power minions in a typical deck, your opponent doesn't have to play them at the right time to make your destruction cards very relevant. You just have too many that do the same thing. Kraken will allow you to expand to kill 3-power minions, and in that case, the destruction package will be relevant against most decks. As it stands without a Titan, the destruction package mostly serves to counter wizards and to counter Innsmouth. And of course, bears and vampires tend to counter the pirates without their Titan, but don't as badly. Bears don't as badly, and vampires probably almost don't at all counter pirates when the pirates have Kraken, because these two factions are capable of not having a 2-power minion if they don't want to have one. And finally, we get the retention package, and these are the cards that will make a pirate's deck go from okay to actually really good, if maybe a little bit inconsistent. Because if you take a first mate and make it really big, or you just take anything, make it really big, and pair it with a Kraken, you can get way ahead in the power race as the game goes on. You still will have some ramp up time, but it should be obvious to anyone who's played with the Pirates for a while that when you have 4 first mates staying in play after every base, you're probably winning the game. So because of this, factions that are good at killing 2-power minions, ironically, end up tending to counter the Pirates a little bit by shutting down this package. They shut it down entirely if you don't have the Kraken. They shut it down partially when you do have the Kraken. I left these 2 cards, Buccaneer and Powder Keg, out of the 3 main packages because the combination tends to be good in just about any deck against most opposing decks, and it doesn't really dictate whether you've got a good or a bad matchup because Powder Keg is a 1 of, Buccaneer is a 2 of, you won't always manage to line them up in a game, even in 2-player. Also, there's an even more powerful way to use Powder Keg. Cave of Shinies is Corset. That means that if you're playing Pirates, Cave of Shinies is in the base deck. And when you use Powder Keg to blow up all your minions at once at Cave of Shinies reads a minion. That means you probably just won the game. So most of the time, I hold on to Powder Keg unless I'm getting really good value out of it because I know that setting off a Powder Keg bomb at Cave of Shinies can bail me out of a bad situation later in the game. Now, if I have a generally fairly winning position, I'm going to be more willing to cash in my Powder Keg, while if I have a generally bad position, I'm looking at it as I may need to see Cave of Shinies to win. Field of Honor can also score you several victory points, but you need an awesome level 9000 faction present in the game for it to appear in the base deck. And on top of that, Field of Honor reads 1 or more minions, probably because of Powder Keg, and that means that destroying more than 1 minion at the same time will only get you 1 victory point. So it's a little bit more awkward for you to use. Pirates are going to be pretty even with all of their not very good partners, with the exception of Tornadoes, who are probably just absolutely an awful partner for the Pirates. On the other hand, a few of the decks can really stick out as particularly good, and for this video I picked apes, giant ants, mad scientists, plants, and even though I haven't played it yet because it's a new faction, Kung Fu. 4 out of the 5 of these work by in some way creating a large first mate, or by making something else big and planting a Kraken at its base to keep it in play. And Ape Pirates might be the oldest and most famous of these decks, but Giant Ant Pirates have just as good synergy. Mad Scientist and Kung Fu maybe a little less. What I've got to warn you about with these decks, or show you the opportunity of when you're playing against them, is that with the exception of plants, all of these decks have a serious weakness to at least one of destruction that isn't capped by power or return to hand. Because they all rely on stacking either actions or power counters on top of a first mate. And when you return that first mate to hand or find a way to kill it that doesn't care about its power level, you lose all the stuff at once. So if you're going to go for a deck like this, you need to, in a snake draft kind of situation, you want to be picking one half of the deck early on and going for the other half, the weaker half, after at least 1 or 2 opponents have committed to not hard countering it. Plants are going to be just a little bit different. Plants can search for first mate, and Venus Mantrap can get very broken in this deck, but it doesn't have any particular way to protect the first mate. So Plant Pirates are going to do just fine against return to hand, and will also do just fine against a few cards that can kill minions of any size, but they're going to have issues with anything that counters first mate normally, because plant pirates are a little bit more dependent on first mate than the average pirate's deck. Finally, what can you counterpick against the pirates? Bears and vampires can counter the pirates by, in the bear's case, not having a 2-power minion, in the vampire's case being able to choose not to have a 2-power minion based on when they play fledgling vampire, and also by being particularly good at destroying 2-power minions. Both of these matchups get considerably better when you add Kraken to the pirates' decks, because they're no longer out of range from pirates' destruction, but their skill at killing first mate still stands. So basically, if you've got Kraken and you have a partner like apes or giant ants, bears or vampires may not be an issue anymore. But if you have only one of those two advantages, bears and vampires will still be an issue. And if you're taking plants as your good pirates partner, bears and vampires may become even a worse counter than they normally would be. Aliens and time travelers are going to counter pirates by bouncing stuff and setting them back in development. Aliens and time travelers also both counter the destruction package in different ways. Aliens have an alternate path to victory and don't necessarily care about you killing their stuff as long as you're not killing Invader. Time travelers have a 2-power minion that refuses to stay dead unless somebody else takes control of it. And that reminds me of another pirates counter that I forgot to write down. Kitty cats. Kitty cats have this nasty habit of taking control of your first mate and then sacrificing it, or just taking control of your first mate before a base breaks so that they control it and they get to choose whether to move it to another base, and then they choose not to move it to another base instead of the discard pile. This is enough to turn off the retention package entirely against kitty cats, and they tend to be a horrible matchup for pirates. Princesses, ninjas, and ghosts all might counter pirates, but it's not really a hard counter. Ghosts and ninjas have a fairly easy time killing off the first mate. Ninjas also can slice right through shielding by using Tiger Assassin or Ninja Master, who are minions instead of actions, to destroy the powered-up first mate. And Ghosts, similarly, Ghosts will kill a powered-up first mate with Spirit, and shielding won't protect the first mate at all. Giant Ants and Mad Scientists can still protect a first mate by, in the case of the Mad Scientists, making it completely indestructible. In the case of the Giant Ants, they can keep a drone in play who can prevent its destruction. Princesses have movement of their own, which tends to make the pirates' movement a little less relevant, and princesses are also pretty good at killing 2-power minions. And the final maybe counter I can think of here is, with the introduction of Kraken, Sheep might become a bit of a pirate's counter. Bo Peep was already good against every opposing faction with movement. Like, I tend to think Sheep soft counter opposing movement factions, because they can shut down movement for one base once in the game. But also, Sheep don't have a 3, and with Kraken, the pirates are getting a destruction cap of 3 power, and now bears and vampires aren't outranging Broadside, but Black Sheep does outrange Broadside, and that could be an issue for the pirates, finding out that both the movement package doesn't work very well, the destruction package can only kill flocks, and at that point I think the Sheep might also be a pirate's counter.